この裁判は初めから有罪ありきの。なぜ私をその目で見る?
What did you think when you first looked at this scene in Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3? Sadness, anger, bittersweetness, unfairness, confusion, or probably nothing? However, for me, it was fear. Why would anyone be afraid of this? But when you really pay attention to Higuruma's backstory, understand every conversation and event leading up to this moment, you will start feeling ominous about this disdainful pair of eyes looking at Higuruma. To me, it felt like some kind of weird feeling was creeping inside of me, but I couldn't know what it was. So in this video, I want to talk about that feeling and answer the one question that was repeated throughout Higuruma's backstory.
君の心はどうなるのさ、ヒグルマくん。
Higuruma is a very talented lawyer and was called a genius by his peers. However, he hadn't used that fact to his advantage and earned big money from the rich or become a church. Instead, he became a criminal defense lawyer and always picked up impossible cases because he wanted to save the weak and ugly. When we first got introduced to Higuruma, he picked up Oya's case, which was about Oya being prosecuted for the murder of a mother and a daughter. Police claimed that there was a knife covered in blood that contained victims' DNA in Oya's apartment, but Oya's claim was opposite. He claimed that the knife was not his and he had only picked it up. So from a wide standpoint of view, his claim was quite literally unbelievable at this point, and this case is quite frankly impossible to solve. Even then, the commission for cases like this is low despite how much work they take. And generally, there was nothing to gain here. No money, no reputation boost, no easy win. And so if this was me having this case, I'm getting out of here. Like, what the frick, mate? However, for Higuruma, he was known for picking up impossible cases like this. Back in the past, he picked up a case of a drunk driver. In that case, he tried everything and managed to get a suspended sentence for the defendant. But still, the defendant lashed out at him for not getting an innocent verdict. And from that experience, it kind of broke Higuruma just a bit. But then his colleague asked him, "But what about your mental state, Higuruma?" Now, when I first watched this scene, I felt very curious about why he was doing this and what was going on his mind. And in the middle of it, it cut to the next scene where Higuruma and his assistant were trying to find evidence to solve the case, hiding away the answer to that very question.
主文、被告人は無罪。
Oh, wow, nice. He's innocent. What a relief. That's what I thought. And then it cut to the scene where everybody was clowning on Higuruma, taking pictures of him. Some guy even rumored that Higuruma, he had paid money to the church. And I was like, it makes sense though, if you're an outside person, like a person not involved in the case.
日車先生、本当にありがとうございます。先生は勘弁してくれ。それに気が早い。まだ二審がある。そうじゃなくて、俺を信じてくれてありがとう。
Damn, dude. This moment made me feel glad and pity for a lot because there was no one believing in regarding his claims and the situation he was in. However, Higuruma believed in him and gave him hope. I even talked to myself, wow, is this how true gratefulness look?
難しい。この裁判は初めから有罪ありきの。
Oya got a life sentence verdict, which led him to complete disappointment in Higuruma and looked at him with these pairs of eyes. This moment had me feel fear instead of sadness or anger, because earlier he was so appreciative and now it's like 180, ignoring all of that, and look at me, dead in the eyes with that very disdainful, disappointing eyes. I had the same reaction as Higuruma. What are those eyes? Why are you looking at me like that? A specific fear of being looked at as if you failed someone who trusted you completely after giving everything you had. I would say it's the same as a surgeon trying his best to save a child's life, but unfortunately it wasn't a success, so then the parents looked at the doctor with the same kind of eyes, just as Oya's eyes right there. It looked horrifying if you were the person responsible for saving him, and a devastating kind of feeling when you realize Higuruma couldn't do anything else to save him. At this moment, if I were Higuruma, I would realize that no matter how hard you try, no matter how good you are, this world still turn a blind eye to the righteous and just one. Effort and goodness mean absolutely nothing here. And then it cut back to his colleague asking, "What about your mental state, Higuruma?" She's literally asking Higuruma, "You care so much about saving everybody else, but what about you? What is all of this doing to you on the inside?" And the answer was never going to come in words. Case after case, loss after loss, carrying other people's pain without ever caring for himself until and that's when it literally collapsed everything. His mental state was completely shattered. And finally, he answered that very question, not by words, but by the murder of the judge and the prosecutor using his curse technique. From this point of view, you can definitely say that Higuruma had let out all of the frustration that he has stored up throughout his career.
戻れ。やり直しだ。
After that, he joined the coding game, but that's a whole other story, which is not included in this video. However, the last thing I want to include is how he changed up his way of thinking after an encounter with Yuji Itadori. You see, because of his experience with people and cases, he was fed up with empathizing with the ugly and weak. Empathizing them means understanding their weaknesses. He believed that helping them wouldn't change anything about them, no matter what. However, as for Yuji, he was always a dude who wanted to help others, not because he pitied anyone or anything like that, but rather his grandfather, before dying, told Yuji that he is a strong person and he should save anyone he can and go as far as he can. It doesn't matter if he doesn't get any gratitude or anything in return. So when these two characters clash with each other, it's the same as darkness and light. Higuruma dashing at Yuji resembles darkness, and then there's Yuji getting flashed by the lights, which resembles the polar opposite of Higuruma. Throughout the fight, Higuruma wondered and was extremely upset about why Yuji confessed to his mass murder, because from being a lawyer, he had never encountered anyone that confessed to a crime that they did not commit, like Itadori Yuji. The irony of Higuruma in Yuji is like a man who has defended the falsely accused his whole life to finally meeting someone falsely accused who refuses to claim his innocence. And as they were about to collide into each other, Higuruma opened up and tried to look at Yuji. But he was too bright as a human being at that moment, just a teenage boy trying to save as many lives as he can and take up the responsibility for not being able to save them because he's weak. Seeing that in Yuji, he released his technique and claimed Yuji was innocent and finally empathized. After he gave Yuji 100 points, he claimed that he would turn himself in for the murder of the prosecutor and the judge. And so the final question is, what happened to Higuruma's mental state at this point? Why would a man who gave up on people now willingly turn himself in for murder? I felt like his mental state was recovered by Itadori Yuji, the hope that was once shattered by the harsh and unfair reality, and now it had returned to redeem itself.